ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to These Go to 11. Once again, I'm Nathan Bell. Joining me, as always, Zach Bartles. Zach, what's going on, man?
Dude, I'm just ready to talk about our topic. I've got no other little funny thing to say. I just want us to get Turk looped in and get going.
Well, we do have a couple things to say. I mean, first of all, we've got to promote our sponsor today. I mean, huge sponsor. This is probably the biggest sponsor we've ever had, and it's a returning sponsor, and that is Gut Check Press.
Oh, Gut Check. Turkish has done a little of the little odd job for Gut Check, meaning the foreword to every book we've ever written.
It's like my side job. It's my side hustle.
Are those royalties rolling in for you there, Turk?
Oh, man. I'm a made man because of it.
Dude, we let him sell his T-shirts in one of them. That happens. And whenever we meet in Detroit for pizza that gives us bad diarrhea, we always pay. Dude, that place cleaned me out every time. We go to Leonardo's, just outside DTW. We met Turk there. I think you and I met.
It's a cleanse.
I think you and I met at a Big Boy once, but then you and me and Big Ted, we met like probably 3 times. And every time afterwards, my stomach would start percolating, and I'd be like, oh. But you know what? It was worth it to hang out with Turkish.
Nice.
All right, that's my favorite. That's my favorite story from you ever, Zach. That's excellent.
Oh man! Well, we do want to announce, or I should say, re-announce, because we did announce this a couple years ago. But Zach's book, Playing Saint, it is, ladies and gentlemen, this is the book that changed Greg's life. This is the book that sat on his desk for well over 4 months, and we had Zach on, and he still hadn't got to reading it. I mean, that's how
that book's old news, man. I want to talk about Playing Saint All Souls Day, because tomorrow is All Souls Day.
Well, we were getting. That's right. That's right. All right,
that's the connection.
So you talk about the book, Zach, because obviously I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, the thing is, you were trying to be nice by promoting everything, but I've already got all the money from that publisher I'm ever going to get. So the only reason that I want people to buy that first book is so that they'll want to buy the second one.
There you go.
The book Playing Saint All Souls Day, I think, is probably my best, because I was unencumbered by the demands of the Christian, what would you call, the publishing complex, the evangelical bonnet mafia, and I was able to just kind of do what I wanted with it.
Nice.
The calico-clad mafia of Christian publishing.
Here's a story, a real story. I tried to name a character after Turkish, not Frank Turk, but I tried to name him a guy Cyrus Turk, and he was a like a mafioso type guy, and an editor said, "Is this guy black?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Well, then the name, it just sounds black." And I think people are going to have the wrong picture in their mind. So I had to change the name to something very white sounding. But I left the name in as an Easter egg there when they're pulling a con. At one point, the guy identifies himself as Cyrus Turk. And then maybe she was a comics fan and she was thinking of Turk, in the Marvel comics. And that's why
I doubt that there's anybody in Christian publishing who knows that much about comics.
Oh, man. Well, Zach, since you just led us right into comics, we do have Turk here talking to us about Daredevil. Ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be an all Daredevil episode. And gentlemen, I feel like we could even go back and talk about season 1, because we haven't talked about seasons 1 or 2 on this.
What?
Yeah.
What kind of podcast is this?
I know, right?
Lame.
I know. That was back when Greg was on.
Not enough Turkish. That's the problem.
There'll be no Catwoman references.
Oh man,
we'll
work something out. I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see. Maybe we'll get there. I slid it in already, so that's good.
So
yeah, okay. So what do you want? Where do you want? I mean, we'll start in season 1. Where do you want to start in season 1?
Let's start here first, because so Greg actually just asked me recently. He was like, okay, so I haven't seen I think he did see Luke Cage, but like the second seasons of these things that are coming out, he hasn't seen them. And he was like, so I'm just wondering if I need to see them in order to catch anything that's going on in season 3. And I said, no, I mean, if you've seen Daredevil 1, 2, and you saw the Defenders, you should be able to roll right into season 3. Would you guys agree that's a fairly accurate assessment?
Yeah. Yes.
You're not going to get all of the, the fan service and all the fun little interconnects and Easter eggs, but you'll appreciate the story, I guess. Yeah. I mean, the Defenders is your main thing, but I mean, watching the Defenders without having seen all of the, component parts and their origin stories. I even think Iron Fist season 1 was worth watching.
Oh, you gotta be kidding!
I do. It wasn't amazing, but I thought it was worth watching.
It was not even good.
Dude, season 2, they upped, and I know this isn't the topic, but they upped that fight scene game like crazy.
Oh, we're going to have a fight on here.
There's going to be a huge fight. Let's talk about Daredevil before we take apart Iron Fist, okay?
No, Turkish, it's okay, man, because it ended on the corniest, stupidest note in the world. Where, like, with the Iron Fist guns, and I was just like, oh, you ruined it.
It was ruined. The best line in 2 seasons of Iron Fist is where Iron Fist's buddy from Kunlun, what is his name?
Davos.
Yeah, when Davos says to Danny, "You're the worst Iron Fist ever." That sums up both seasons. It sums up both seasons, and he's exactly right. That show could have been so good, and it would have been so easy to make it amazing, and they just completely. Everything about that show is nothing like the comics. It's horrible.
That's true.
It's horrible. The comics are so fun. They're so comic booky and kung fu-y, and the comics are great. And even when the comics get like super mystical, like there's this guy Carrie Andrews who wrote one of the generations of Immortal Iron Fist, where he's sort of Danny's suffering from a little bit of PTSD from being the Iron Fist. And he still has to save Kunlun because he's the Iron Fist, and that comic is so surreal and psychological, but it's still a kung fu comic, and that's what this thing is supposed to be about. It's not a melodrama; it's a kung fu thing. It should be kung fu, and it should be exactly like the old kung fu TV series, where
if you can snatch the rice from my hand, Grasshopper.
Yeah, well, he's supposed to be this Zen guy, centered. You can't fool him. You can't ruffle him. You can't scare him. And he has a mission, and he's going to get it done. There's nothing about that in this show, and that's why it sucks. Because Danny he's not just the worst Iron Fist ever. He's the worst Iron Fist you could imagine. He's terrible.
I wonder if Trick's going to tell us what he thinks about Iron Fist later in the program. Let's get back to Daredevil, and let me bridge the gap here, and we can maybe talk about it all at once. The thing that just got me so amped for season 3 that had my toes tingling was the initial poster where the red suit is like in that amazing kind of like liquid covering the city to reveal it away. It's pulling away and revealing the black suit beneath.
Yes,
I could not. I was like, I would pay $200 to watch an episode right now instead of waiting 2 weeks. I was so excited.
Absolutely. And this storyline, this Frank Miller storyline that they used is one of the best Daredevil storylines ever. I mean, obviously it's very heavily adapted from the comics, but holy mackerel, all of the beats were there. The black suit, I'm sorry. I mean, it was a payoff at the end of season 1 for him to get the so-called red suit, but that black suit is so much better. The tone of it is so much more in tune with the rest of this show. It's great. I'm with you, and all of it was just amazing.
Trick, I got to disagree though about the Frank Miller storyline. I actually like the Kevin Smith stuff from the 90s.
Nah,
I'm kidding. That was supposed to make you laugh.
Okay.
Dude, I admit this. I've been a comic fan from the I like how my voice cracked when I was talking about being a comic fan. That's fitting. From the mid to late 80s when I was an adolescent until I really stopped buying them probably about 10 years ago, I stopped buying them obsessively. And I have quite a few of those old, like I've got a lot of the old Frank Miller Daredevil. I think I got him into them because I was at antique shops and I would find, comic books where people had size on the cover. And I was like super into. I thought that was so super cool. And so like the stuff with Stick and the hand and everything. But after this show came out, I went back and bought like graphic novel after graphic novel full of stuff I had missed. And I'm going, I missed some of the best stuff in comics. It was coming out while I was a reader, and for some reason I never got into it. And it is so great.
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, it's and the great thing I think about that generation of Daredevil and even that generation of Batman is that that's when it was fresh. It was before everybody got their hands on it and made it all, they tarnished it with their own crappy takes on these versions of these characters. This is where this stuff came from, and this was really when Miller, it was before he went completely crazy and couldn't write anymore. But this is when he was really at sort of the peak of his creative ability, putting this stuff together with a much darker tone. But it's not so dark that there's no heroism in it,
Yes.
It's that this world is dark.
Yeah.
The things that are happening are dark, and sometimes even heroism has to take this path through darkness to get to light. That is such good stuff.
I would say that this that the Frank Miller, whether you're talking Batman Year One, whatever. I'm not a big fan of the good grief. What is the one like the Return of the Dark Knight or whatever it was? Dark Knight Returns. But like. There's a quote from him where he says, there's not that big a difference between a cape and a long trench coat. And like that kind of, let's make this all feel like this urban thing that could be happening all around us.
Yes.
I think that's why I don't care about the Kree and the Skrull and these when you see like the poster of all the Marvel guys, any of the guys in the back row who are like 13 stories tall, I don't care about you. I want you to, I really want you to be someone who, according to the rules of, granted, you can't have sonar super hearing that, but according to, the enhanced rules of reality, this could happen. You don't need to throw space into it. You don't even need to throw gamma rays into it for my favorite stuff.
Yeah,
the Punisher was always one of my favorite titles. If I would have really given it a chance, Daredevil would have been Batman, Robin, Nightwing, all the bats. So this stuff, to me, this is the best thing in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, this show.
You know what? I completely agree. I completely agree. I think that and especially on TV, the 3 seasons of Daredevil are by a long shot the best Marvel TV there is by 100%.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and one of the things that I feel like is so great about this, because this by far, when you even if you're just looking at the stuff that Netflix is doing, this is just by far my favorite. I mean, Defenders was pretty cool to see, but it didn't have the same punch that I feel like, no pun intended, that Daredevil has. I mean, Daredevil just has it all. I mean, it's got that mystery. It's got the mafia stuff going on. It's got
the church stuff going on.
Exactly.
Which is important to me.
Yeah. That whole like redemption story that's in there is fantastic. So yeah, I mean, to me, this is the most compelling story. And this is why I keep coming back to Daredevil, because they started it off strong in season 1 and they kept it going strong for 3 seasons.
Yeah, absolutely, and I would say this. I think that the Defenders had so much opportunity to be better than it was, and it was weak because it was so muddled. They couldn't decide whose story this was. I think that they started off thinking that this is really going to be sort of the climactic Iron Fist story, but all the characters that were important in this story were Iron Fist characters. They weren't Daredevil characters. But it turned out that they realized that their best character is Matt Murdock, and the story shifted. About the middle, when Sigourney Weaver gets killed, it shifts to being this Daredevil story, this Matt Murdock story, because there were all the others. The others were good. I mean, I honestly kind of liked the first season of Jessica Jones. It was weird, There was some stuff in it I could have done without, but it was a compelling psychological story. I kind of liked it.
I did too.
But there wasn't enough of her in Defenders. There's not enough of her in Luke Cage, I think. I mean, that's my opinion. Mm-hmm. And I think that in Luke Cage, again, I think the first half of the first season of Luke Cage was amazing. Mm-hmm. It was amazing. But it somehow it diluted, and then the second season of Luke Cage was again very diluted. It didn't stay on path. But the Daredevil stuff, I think, because it does so much homage to the comics. You know, I think it's a lot like the Captain America movies. That these movies are they are not the comics, but they're about the comics.
Yeah,
you know, and they do a great job of following these storylines in a TV cinematic way, rather than trying to be a comic book or trying to be a movie. I'm just totally sold on the Daredevil franchise. I think it's great.
One thing I did like about the Defenders was how they gave Colleen such a big subplot. That to me was way more interesting than Danny's stuff. Yeah. And honestly, I think they completely wasted Luke Cage. You might as well not have been there.
Yeah,
he was background. Yeah, and that guy, that dude's just so much presence, and it didn't even feel like he was there.
Oh, but, he's so charismatic in that role. I think he's a great Luke Cage. I think you're right. He's wasted. Go ahead. Sorry, Zach, but I think you're right.
One thing I love, by the way, is how they do little nods to the comics, like when he's remembering the moment he escaped from where they were doing the experiments on him, and like the thing they had around his head and stuff in order to shock him was the old suit.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's so perfect.
Absolutely. He comes out of that tank. I'm like, buddy.
Power Man. That's Power Man.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. That was epic. Quite epic.
Here's the best thing about Daredevil, the casting.
Oh, yeah.
Speaking of perfect people to play things. I mean, no one has how many movies now have we seen with the Punisher? I want to say 4, right?
Yeah, 3 or 4.
And the guy in Warzone, Ray Stevenson, he was all right as like the old Punisher. He was good. Dolph Lundgren, you freaking and then Thomas Jane was worse. But
somehow, because he could have been better.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. He's too much of a pretty boy. I mean, you don't want to even look at how do you, is this Bernthal? Is that his name? The guy.
Yeah, yes.
We remember him from. I liked the first season and a half or so of Walking Dead, and he was the best part of it. Man, that guy became the Punisher.
Absolutely.
No one's ever been. You know, let me do this. You two guys, I'm going to run down this list, this cast list, and you give me a 1 to 10 on how perfect the casting is. I mean, just a few of these people. All right. Charlie Cox is Matt Murdock.
10.
Oh yeah, 10.
Agreed. Karen Page.
7 or 8. I don't know if she's perfect, but she's great in that role.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
All right. This guy who plays Foggy. I don't remember his actor's name.
I always think of you when I see him, and I think he's great.
Yeah,
8 or a 9.
I would definitely say 9. I would say 9 or 10.
Just amazing, right? All right, so John Bernthal as Frank Castle.
10.
And 10 for sure, right?
Oh, yeah. The only reason he's not an 11 is because the Kingpin is an 11.
Yes. I was just
saving him for last.
That's right. Save him for last. Absolutely.
Because I think we have a lot to talk about with him. Elektra?
8 or 9.
I would go a little lower than that.
Really?
Yeah.
But you know, Nathan thinks that what's her name from the Elektra movie was a 10. And is it possible that the reason this seems so incredibly amazing is because that Kevin Smith Ben Affleck movie was such a monumental turd? Doesn't hurt this one. What about Father Lantom? Now, I don't know if that exact priest character, I think he might be a couple of different characters kind of combined from the comics, but the church imagery, the stained glass windows, all that factors in. I feel like his casting was amazing.
Oh, yeah. His role
very,
in that,
very
definitely
good. 7 or 8,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
then what about Ben Urich? And were they way off base to kill this guy off?
No, I think, it's funny. It's funny you say Kevin Smith, because there are some things that he does get about comic books, and Ben Urich is the price paid. Ben Urich is the guy who has to die to make everybody else's sacrifices and her heroism mean more, especially in Karen's life, especially over the course of the 2 series of Daredevil and Punisher. Karen's the motive of who she really is. I mean, even after this season 3, and I don't want to spoil season 3 for anybody, but everything we learn about Karen in season 3, when you stack that next to what she inherits from Ben, that's what makes her such a good character.
Yeah, I think you're right. I can see that. I mean, I wish they would have waited a little later, because to me, like, that guy. You know how sometimes even when you're looking at a comic, you think of an actor?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. That guy he's one of those that guy character actors, and I've thought of him as that's who I would have cast myself. Yeah. All right, now I want to give you 2 together, because in my mind, and maybe this isn't justified, in my mind they're both like 20 out of 10. James Wesley and the Kingpin.
Oh, well, James Wesley is the character that isn't in the comic books that should have been in the comic books. Yeah. He is such a... Are you kidding me?
Hold on, back up. I'm thinking about 2 issues of The Punisher from the early 90s that I have, and Fisk sends a guy to close a deal with somebody, and he winds up killing them, and I was, in my mind, 100% sure that's who this Wesley is. It's not? This guy's not in the comic.
I don't. You might be right, Zach. I don't remember him in the comics. I remember Kingpin having a lot of guys like Wesley, but nobody who, as we see in this season, where he really sort of, I mean, insofar as he can, loves him like a son.
Mm. Right.
Right. That there's nobody who is not really his heir apparent, but his crown prince. And this is that's who Wesley is. That's who Wesley is, and I like I said, he's not in the comics. He should be in the comics, I think. Mm-hmm. And I could be wrong. Maybe one of your listeners is going to say this is where Turk demonstrates what a jerk he is. So, but I don't remember Wesley in the comics per se. There are guys like him all over the place, but not him.
3 more before we get to the big one. Mm-hmm. Stick. Yep. Scott Glenn is Stick.
Oh,
perfect.
Yeah,
so perfect, right?
Spot on.
Perfect.
Yep.
I mean, it's like these people literally, and people say this all the time, but I'm like, literally, this is why he should be an actor. He was born for exactly this.
Exactly.
And then we've got the Gladiator, Melvin Potter.
Why am I blanking on that?
He makes the suits.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
He's perfect. He's perfect. Yes, 9 or a 10.
Yeah, and then what about Turk?
Oh, that's my favorite. That's my favorite running joke in the Netflix universe.
He's more omnipresent than what's her name, Rosario Dawson.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Everybody knows him. He's into everything a little bit. He's not really evil. He's not really good. He's just that guy,
Survivor. Yeah. And they're never gonna. If they kill him off, all bets are off. But yeah, I mean, I think we've demonstrated that literally this thing was theirs to lose. I mean, it was
right.
And I've seen a cast this good, everyone's 9s and 10s try to deal with bad material and it still comes off. But I mean, the writing was so good.
Yeah.
And so season 1 and season 3 are about, I mean, the main antagonist is the Kingpin, which I was so stoked when they finally said the word this season.
Yes.
Yep.
Why is he so amazing? Why is D'Onofrio literally perfection for that part?
Oh, well, I mean, just to start with, because he's D'Onofrio. I mean, I don't want to. I don't think you can overstate that. That guy has such a great understanding of playing guys who are mentally damaged but not crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, just think of him as Private Gomer Pyle that's like one of his earliest roles. And this Kingpin is such an interesting, cultured, redeemed in a certain way sense of Gomer Pyle that he's got this super broken history that he's trying to build a life on top of, especially for the sake of his mother, you know? And he just gives it such incredible depth. And some of that is the writing, but it's the way he does it. His physical presence as the Kingpin, his face as the Kingpin, his emotional reactions as the Kingpin, it's incredible. I get so drawn in watching him play this character, watching him stare at a white wall.
Yes.
Just watching that and looking at him, and you know, he's not sitting there blankly looking at a white wall. You can see that what he's looking at is what he's looking for. He's looking into that whiteness and he's saying, Where am I? Where's what I want?
Oh, he's not even watching paint dry. He's watching dry paint, and he can sell it. I mean, that's a great actor.
Yeah,
exactly. That is exactly right.
Well, and you know, just like Gomer. Sorry, Nathan.
No, that's
just brief. Just like Gomer Pyle, right? You want to hug him, and like I remember when I was a kid, I went to this class drawing cartoons, and the lady at the end drew a really amazing cartoon. I don't remember what it was, but she was going to give it away to somebody. And this kid next to me was like this really ragey kid. And he got so mad when he didn't win it that he kicked over his own cartoon and like wrecked it a little bit. And I feel like whenever that's the most empathy I felt in my early life, was seeing him get that angry and realizing that was not, you know, that was him being hurt. And even when Fisk does something like put that guy's coat over his head and just punch him into oblivion, that's the kind of angry it is. You almost want to comfort him.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and it is because he has such a tragic backstory. I mean, this is one of those villains that you can sympathize with. I mean, a real life example. I remember my father-in-law telling me, you know, he would go into prisons and be talking with, you know, the bottom, what society would consider the bottom of the barrel in terms of criminals and things like that. And he said, you know, the most interesting thing is when you actually get to talk with them, you realize that their childhood was just as broken as the things that they're doing to these other people. And I think that's what makes him so compelling is it's not like he just rises, you know, from, you know, great wealth into, you know, being this terrible person. He does have a tragic backstory, which makes him more sympathetic.
Absolutely. And I think that he's not just, you know, kind of wandering malevolence. You know, he's not just this dark overthinker or something. You know, and I think that's the other thing I really like about that portrayal of Kingpin in the Daredevil. In the Daredevil series is that you know, these aren't Deus Ex Machina solutions to where the Kingpin comes out on top. The writer has been thinking the whole time in this series that if this happens, Fisk has made this as the place where he's going to get over. Yeah. He is. I mean, Fisk has thought it through, and it looks like a plot. It doesn't look like somebody magically waved a wand and things changed.
Yeah, I was glad they included him a little in season 2, just to remind you he's still there. Yeah. He's still scheming. It's still happening. Yes. Because I feel like everybody wanted Kingpin back for season 2, and they made us wait. And then I sort of wanted the Punisher back for season 3,
right?
And they were like, no, this isn't. That was amazing, but this is different. And of course they gave the Punisher his own amazing season. But
absolutely.
You know, Turkish, just a quick aside, what did you think as a guy who really mostly appreciates, at least with Daredevil it seems, and with most things, you seem to really appreciate the early modern age stuff, you know, the 80s and 90s. And they went with, for season 2, they went with this Garth Ennis story, a subplot from after the Welcome Back Frank, the kind of third wave or whatever of Punisher, you know, post Micro, and I felt like it worked really well. I don't know what you think, like where he tapes the gun into his hand and chains him to the roof and all this stuff.
Yeah, no, I think if I had any objections and this is about preference. This isn't really about anything else. I thought that, and I know it's a stupid thing to say about a series about the Punisher. I thought the Punisher was too violent. I thought it was hyper violent. It sort of gloried in the gore, and I wasn't. That was the only thing about it I didn't like. Everything else about it, the psychology of Frank Castle, just the whole, him not wanting to be, him not really wanting to be a hero, him wanting to settle the score that he had, that's the Punisher. That's who he really is. And again, I think that psychology was done really well in that series. So.
And when you say it's stupid to think it's too violent, I disagree. I think that makes sense because I love the 80s Punisher comics, and I loved that Garth Ennis initial return with Monucci. But once they were like, you know what, let's go to what would they call Marvel Max? Yes. And it was all hyper violent, it was gross. I was like, oh, this doesn't feel like it anymore. This feels like something else. You've pushed the envelope way too far.
Right.
And you always, it's kind of like Hill Street Blues. They made up their own swear words. And then when NYPD Blue came on and they were all like saying everything but the F word, you're like, you've lost your creativity. You don't know how to actually tell the story without, falling in the ditch.
Well, I think that I think was a very interesting counterpoint though in Punisher, because even though it did have all the gore and all the hyper violence, I mean, think about the first 10 minutes of the first episode, where the first scene where you see the violence that took place in the mafia meeting room, the first shot is actually through a bullet hole through somebody's skull. Remember that?
I thought that was brilliant.
That was incredible, but it's gross. It's gross beyond gross. It is expressing something about the level of violence there, which didn't ruin it, but it was a little much. I mean, it wasn't something. Honestly, my kids can't watch The Punisher; it's too violent. So that was too much in that respect. But ultimately, if you could get through that first 10 minutes, I felt like the whole rest of it was extremely good noir sort of. Just tracking the psyche of this man who had something and lost it, and now is not willing to settle that it can't be resolved. That somehow process isn't good enough here to solve this. It has to be man against man.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's good stuff. Super good stuff. I really, like I said, I like it a lot. I think it was too violent for some people to watch, and I get that.
What did you guys think of the spiritual conflict and character development in season 3?
I really liked it. I mean, I thought that's one of the things that really was compelling with it, especially after seasons 1 and 2, where you see Matt so devoted. You see him so devoted, constantly going into confession and, having that struggle, and he's got a crisis of faith that he kind of thinks he's resolved in his mind where, well, I'm just going to give into what I want to do. But you can tell that he's got this crisis of faith and he's working through it. And I thought that was masterfully done, the way everything was portrayed. And it's interesting because, we all belong, to different groups on social media. And I remember one of the groups that I belonged to, they were critiquing and criticizing this. And to me, this felt like one of the most real portrayals of somebody who is really, truly struggling with their conscience and their convictions that just came to light. What were you guys' thoughts?
Yeah, I think that Matt Murdock's crisis of faith was congruent with the character that Matt Murdock was. Okay, so I'm going to say that first. I think that it was, and it's important for the story because of the kind of story it is, right? Mm-hmm. That Matt, again, I don't want to spoil any of the really great things that happen in that. So I don't want to spoil any of that. So I'm going to stop trying to say what I was going to say, and I'm going to say this. But it was a generic crisis of faith. For Matt to be as Catholic as he's supposed to be, I think that somebody on that writing staff should have found a Catholic someplace, because the priest wasn't very Catholic, the nuns weren't very Catholic, and Matt himself was not very Catholic. It was a very generic, theistic crisis of faith, and not so much a Catholic crisis of faith, which I think is an interesting part of the comics. I think the comics actually do a little bit better job of kind of looking at the majesty, the pageantry of Catholicism, and comparing that to the pageantry of the violence that Daredevil goes through to try to stop the Kingpin. I think that was interesting in the comics, and we didn't get so much of that here. But that's because of the kind of story it was. Really, this is a very personal story and not a story about pageantry.
I really loved the lady that played the nun.
Yes.
I felt like she stole every scene she was in, but in a good way.
Yes.
Her tide lifted all ships, and that was a hard role to play because it could have been cheesy.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
With everything that happened, it turned out like really moving. And just, I hope she's in more of these Marvel things. I thought she was great. And I don't know, even though you're right, it was like TV Catholicism, which is basically, Reverend Lovejoy belongs to the same denomination as most, it's just, okay, a guy is a pastor and you believe in God, and they don't really suss it out. But at the same time, just to have a superhero that's not this spiritual but not religious, mixing together all these East Asian mystery things, and B, to have especially to have him be a priest, because of just how quick the world is to jump on and say, oh no, I molest kids, blah blah. To have clergy on the screen that are understanding and helpful and part of the solution, not part of the problem. It's the opposite of when you're reading or watching V for Vendetta, and anything that has to do with the church is corrupt and has to be burnt out.
Right, or Sin City is the same way. Yeah,
exactly. Yes, and that's so cynical. And this wasn't. It was optimistic to me. Like the church is supposed to do this, and obviously it's not doing it perfectly, but it's still there, and it's still part of what grounds this guy and makes him still human and keeps him from becoming what he's hunting. That even though you're right, it was generic. It was just such a breath of fresh air to me.
Oh, I actually would agree with that part. I think it has to do with my own personal journey, being a very committed ex-Catholic, but still being very committed to Christ. I just know what that journey looks like from the inside. You know what I mean? And I think that when they make it that generic, that's probably as much as secular society can take. But I think that there's so much nuance in there that could be worked out. It was good. It was good for the story. I don't want to say it wasn't good for the story. I think I think I would have asked for more, but maybe I would have ruined it by asking for more.
Now, what I've done here is I've stolen Nathan's usual role as kind of the host, which I did last time you were on as well, Turk. So let me pose another question.
Yes,
and that is, what did you think of what they did with Bullseye?
Great. I was a huge fan. I wasn't sure where it was going until about halfway through. I didn't really get it until all of a sudden, even in the scene where you really should get it, right? The one scene where it's important that this guy has this ability that he has, right at the beginning. Uh-huh. I wasn't sure that I got it the first time. I was like, what's going to happen here? Because I tried to read. I'm kind of somebody who usually likes to read all the spoilers before you dive into this, but I wanted to go into this really super fresh and sort of see if I liked it anyway. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. They surprised me. They surprised me with it, and in surprising me, I think they disappointed me a little bit too, because I really love the Bullseye costume.
Yeah.
So
the Bullseye costume is dope.
So in that, I think that it was he has a great foil for Daredevil. Bullseye, they could have. There's all kinds of sort of cheesy villains they could do with Daredevil, but to have Kingpin and Bullseye against Daredevil, man, every fanboy under the age of 70 was like, "This is amazing." because that is like peak Daredevil.
Right.
And the fact that, I mean, that's kind of within the skill set of Daredevil too, is to be able to throw something and, you know, using his enhanced abilities, hit the mark every time. So it's a perfect foil. Sub question, real quick. I want to ask you one thing about specific about Poindexter there, but how hard? Here's a spoiler. Somebody gets Daredevil's billy club thrown into his chest so that it punctures his skin, his ribs, and kills him by Bullseye. I'm not going to tell you who. I'm not going to tell you when that happens. How hard would you have to throw a blunt thing? I thought that Bullseye's ability was that he was perfectly accurate, not that he had insane super strength. That to me was a moment that took me out of it.
Yeah, I agree. It was the wrong object to do what he did with it. Because there was, I mean, in the context, I mean, think about where that scene happens. There were 100 things in the room he could have done that with, and to do it with the billy club is it's very comic booky, but it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I mean, I've known people who've thrown things at me that were hard, and I never worried they were gonna puncture me like a bullet. Come on.
Wait, let me call Ted and find out when the last time that happened was.
Ted couldn't hit the broadside of a barn.
That's why he was such a good quarterback.
Now, do you think that a reason that they shied away from the comic bookier aspect of Bullseye is because Colin Farrell was such a disaster playing the guy? You remember the first scene? He opens up the paper clip and throws into a guy's brain, and you're like, all right, is that the guy who won a stinking screenwriting Academy Award just scant years ago? What is happening?
Exactly. No. I think that's exactly right. I mean, I think that this goes back to the reference you made earlier. I mean, I think that they have done so much instead of consciously trying to be unlike those crappy movies. What they're consciously trying to do is to be what they are. Right? And to step away and not to think about what should we not be, but what should we be? You know, and I think the great thing, just again, about season 3 is the psychology. The psychology of Bullseye is great. Mm-hmm. You know, the idea of who he starts off as and who he turns into. These things make sense together. You know, and that way he doesn't have to be this scenery chewing lunatic, you know, that's way over the top crazy. He's this super subtle psychotic.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Somebody who you literally until you realize it, you don't know how crazy he is.
Yeah. One of the things that I want to talk about is the chemistry between all the characters, because there is not I was honestly looking for this as I was going into this. There is not one wasted scene between any of the main characters, and they are all interacting with one another at one point in time or another. And I'm riveted watching these. And to me, one of the greatest scenes was a confrontation between Karen and Kingpin. That whole scene where they are just there at, you know, just there. To me, that was just mind blowing. Just watching that and watching, you know, that play back and forth between the two and who's going to break first, and seeing that. But so you had those dynamic scenes that stood out like that, but even more subtle scenes. You were talking about the nun, and you have the scenes between the nun and Matt, the nun and the priest, the nun and Karen, and there's just not one wasted scene between those characters. Every time there is dialogue that is going on in the show, I'm never sitting there bored like, can we just move on to the action? Can we move on and drive the plot? Because I'm just so riveted by what is going on between these characters, and they're using those to advance the plot. It is helping in so many ways. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
Well, go ahead. Go ahead, Zach. No, go ahead, Zach.
I was going to say the chemistry, I think the thing that can happen when you have an amazing cast that can sink it is the writing doesn't create the right space for them to have that chemistry. Mm-hmm. and this is the strength of this is that the ensemble cast has this perfect atmosphere. You know, they can play off each other because they're all going, and you know, every line, even though none of them seem like exposition, are pushing you in the right direction toward where the story is going. Mm-hmm. And it struck such a great balance from the point of view of a writer between character driven and plot driven. Yeah. It was both in such a real way. And yeah, I mean, like Foggy and Karen together, Matt, yeah, everybody, you're right. There's not a weak link in that chain.
Right.
I really missed Madame Gao. Her chemistry with Kingpin.
What a waste. What a waste to lose her the way we lost her.
Yeah,
that was a waste.
What a great character. Is she from the comics, or was that a invention?
Yes. No, she's from the comics. This goes back to how great the Iron Fist comics are, you know, because Iron Fist is from Kunlun, but there are like 7 heavenly cities, and Madame Gao is from one of them. And that whole the Hand are not just earthly assassins trying to ruin things for Kunlun. They're an enemy city in that heavenly realm. This is that, and to lose that for Iron Fist was tragic. That's why we wind up with Iron Fist shooting Iron Fist bullets at the end of the second season, because there's nowhere for that character to go. I mean, it's stupid.
Yeah.
You know, we can spoil that because it spoils itself. It's ruined. But here's the thing. I mean, to go back to the thing we were actually talking about is these characters. You know, as it's hard for me sometimes to watch a long form show like this, because I start to get caught up in the process of what it took to put that on the screen, because I get caught up in it. I'm like, this is amazing. This is great. I'm enjoying the heck out of it. The writing is so good. The acting is so good. The directing is so good. Mm-hmm. You know, Daredevil, the 3 seasons together, it's such a stew of people who are obviously working together to do one thing. Nobody's trying to. I mean, you have Vincent D'Onofrio on this show, and he obviously is the massive figure in every scene that he's in, but he's not stealing this series. He is as good as everybody else, and he's directed to be that way. He's written to be that way, and clearly everybody on the show cares that this show is the way it is. It's not something more or less. I just really, there's so much about the way this show works that is admirable, because it's again, I think the other Netflix shows don't all work this well. The first season of Jessica Jones almost worked this well, but it didn't. You know, and I just think the rest of it is just the Daredevil stuff is great, and it is, you know, it's this question of the chemistry. I mean that's the thing about, you know, I don't know how much you guys like go to the theater or anything like that. I mean, one of my favorite things to do right now with my teenage daughter is to go see these plays that the local high schools put on. You know, we went to see a local production of Newsies. Have you guys ever seen Disney's Newsies, musical? Yeah. You know, the movie's very fun. It's just a very fun, very fast paced. You know, if some high school puts it on, it might be great or terrible, but at least it's Newsies. And the one we saw was great, and it was great because everybody was trying to do Newsies. Nobody was trying to be the star of Newsies.
Right.
You know, and when you watch something like that, you can see that the director has told the cast, listen, everybody's in this together. We're all in it together. You might have a lead, you might be in the background, but everybody's doing this together, and we got to do it this way or it's not going to work. And I think that's what's happening on Daredevil, is that the showrunners, the directors, the writers, and the actors are all sort of in this conspiracy to give us what we've got, and not have it not be about something else.
I think another great thing about the chemistry is they didn't go the cheap, easy route of a big kiss scene or something between Matt and these days it'd probably be between Matt and Foggy, you know, to be edgy. I mean, we didn't need that. We didn't need a romantic subplot. We didn't get one. We didn't miss it. It wasn't, it wasn't needed. It wasn't there. And honestly, that to me it's refreshing as well. Just the absence of, so there wasn't a sex scene that I had to thumb through with my remote here. There wasn't it was just, the whole thing held together for what it was without trying to be everything.
Yes.
and it worked really well.
Well, I think that the great part about about season 3, I think, is that there's all of this subtext of failed romance. You know, all of these things where somebody might have loved somebody else, but the life is too complicated for those characters to also somehow try to be married or whatever. You know, and then the one pairing where they are together, right? Mm-hmm. And again, don't want to spoil it, right? It's always thwarted. Mm-hmm. Right. Somehow there's always the monkey wrench in it, and it's that tension that drives the story forward rather than the resolution. It's always that tension.
Well, because there's a realistic ending as opposed to a fairy tale ending.
Yes.
You know, it's not they're not trying to serve this up as, you know, the Disney, you know, prince and princess. It's man, you know, life is rough and life is complicated, and when you are in the midst of these heavy things that are going on, it's not always going to work out, you know. And I think that's one of the great things is that there is a reality to this, and even in that reality, though, there's a hope that comes through, which is so great to see.
Yep. Yeah, it's just great. I honestly, I mean, I think. I mean, and I would also say this, you know, these shows are not for everybody. They are definitely not PG-13. But I think that it's not gratuitous that it goes over the top. You know, it's not gratuitous that it goes past the level of you know, adult themes that you would see in the average Marvel movie. That it's going a half a step beyond that, and not in a gratuitous way. It's doing it to build a more maybe complex, you know, plot and narrative.
Yeah.
How would you guys rate if you had to? And I know it's apples and oranges, but I mean it's not hard to compare apples and oranges because they're both fruits. How would you rate Daredevil as a whole with the Marvel Cinematic Universe? I would say I'd go Winter Soldier number 1, Daredevil as a whole number 2, and then maybe Iron Man tied with it, the first one, and I think everything else in my mind is not as good.
I don't know. I honestly don't know the answer to that because I think they're so different. They're meant to be different things. So, you know, for example, I think that the second Avengers movie is not good. Right? It's not good. Right. Even for what it's supposed to be, it's not that good.
Even James Spader couldn't save it. How is that possible?
Well, I think that's just it. It shouldn't have been James Spader. James Spader was the worst idea for Ultron ever. James Spader would make no way. Ultron is not James Spader. Ultron is something else. There's no question about that. And I love James Spader. I think The Blacklist is brilliant television. That's a fun watch every single time.
Yeah.
Every single time it's a fun watch. But I think that you know, and I think that it's right to say that even the Marvel movies fall on a spectrum. I mean, there are some bad, there are some that are not good. But I think that you know, for me, I mean, to see the full range of it, compare Daredevil to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. stinks compared to Daredevil. It's unwatchable compared to Daredevil. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is actually worse than Iron Fist, if somebody can conceive of that. It's terrible. There aren't 3 episodes in a row of that show where you say, well, that was worth watching. You know, sometimes the last episode of the season is like, well, that was a payoff. That should have been the second episode of this season. You know, that was good enough to get my interest back into this thing. But you know, for 23 episodes, 23 hours to sit there and watch that, and to go back to what you said, Zach, where's the chemistry? There's no chemistry. Where's the plot development? There's none of that. Where do I care about any of this? I can't care about it. So you know, I think that when we think about it, you know, in terms of TV, the Daredevil's by far the best. I think in terms of the movies, I don't know. I mean, because I really like the Ant-Man movies, but they're not. I don't like them I don't like them the way I like the Daredevil series. You know, Ant-Man and Ant-Man and the Wasp are like the kids' versions of the Marvel movies, which make them fun for me. You know, you guys know how I feel about Captain America, and I don't want to bring that up. But yeah, I just think that it's different. It's not like apples and oranges. It's like apples and steak.
See, I would
like
I would say this though. I feel like DC, you know, before they started doing Netflix started doing these Marvel movies, DC tried to move things in a grittier, more realistic kind of way, and I think it failed. And the reason why I think it failed is because you don't see a lot of hope that comes through in those two movies. Like Superman's
what are you
kind of
talking
there.
about?
Like the Man of Steel, and then
okay, I thought you were talking about
Batman.
TV, so I thought you were talking about Arrow and Flash.
No, the movies.
Okay.
I'm talking about the movies. Batman and Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. Like those two movies, I feel like could have been so good, but there was something lacking in them that didn't translate. In trying to make those characters so kind of dark and just, you know, gritty and mean and realistic, there was something that was missing in the comic book element where for
called
whatever
fun.
Well, and I think
Exactly.
that's it. I think Daredevil retains a level of fun to it that allows you to enjoy it. Like, you know that there's hope in there. You know that even though Matt's going through this crisis of faith, you know, and Turkey said, you know, generic crisis, but still crisis of faith, that he's going to ultimately do the right thing. You know, that there's enough influence and people in his lives that are driving, and you don't have ridiculous reveals of things coming out either. You know, like surprise things that are coming out, like you said, they're interesting.
Yes.
It's driving you to watch more and find out, well, what are they going to reveal next? What are they going to reveal next? What's the next big reveal in this? Where Batman v Superman, even Man of Steel, it was kind of like I got halfway through and I was like, is it done yet? I mean, we're only halfway through this, where, I mean, I feel like I could have gone several more episodes, or they could have drug it out several more episodes, and I still would have been interested in it. I got to episode 13, and I'm like, man, I'm already there, you know. And there's so much still going on. But even the fact that they were able to wrap everything up in that season, in that last episode, just blew my mind, and they did it so seamlessly. You know, that blew my mind. Where, you know, I don't think that all comic book movies, I don't think all comic book shows can get away with the level of reality that this brings to it.
Yes.
And you know, when you bring up DC, I think that they were trying with Arrow to do kind of what Daredevil succeeded at, and didn't fully succeed. I mean,
agreed.
It was good-ish. I'm done with it, but it was all right. But when you watch Daredevil, you're like, oh, I see. This is how it's what they meant. This is what they're supposed to do. Right. And like a case in point, you guys, how excited were you when you realized they were doing another one-shot dolly and handheld, or I guess it's a dolly, whatever they did, the one-shot down the long hallway fight like they did season one.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That's always the money. It's always the money.
So brutal and it felt so real. Like, I mean, it reminded me very much of some fights in like Atomic Blonde, which were all like one shot up a staircase.
Yeah.
Where you're just like, you almost feel tired watching it.
Yes.
Well,
but you're like, will he make it?
Right.
You know, that there's real tension in the fight. You know, Cap fights his way through a line of Nazis. There's no question he's getting through the door.
Right.
You know, you know it. And that's the joy of that Captain America can beat all the Nazis. And that's great. But in those scenes with Murdoch, where he's, like you said, those one shots down the hallway, you ask the question after the first round. You're like, how is he going to make it the rest of the way?
Yeah. In the brilliance of the writing and the directing is the fact that they handicap him in some capacity. Yeah. It's not like he's going into these fights fresh and clean like Cap is. You know, I mean, they have in some way given, you know, like I said, handicapped him. Either he's severely injured or something else is going on where, like you said, you're wondering, is he going to pull through this? Because how is he going to make it through one more guy? How is he going to make it through one more guy? And it's fascinating that they think about that stuff. You know, we're not going to put him in there fully charged, ready to go, because of course he could do it in that state.
Right.
You know,
I think. Go ahead, Zach.
I was going to say, I know that Chris Evans is allegedly done playing Captain America, which sucks, but they could really suck me in with a Marvel team-up movie where it's Cap and Daredevil. Just saying. Put it out there.
Oh, yeah, I'm totally. Oh, yeah, that would be epic. That would be incredible. Even just one episode in the next series, that would be just incredible.
And you know that awesome. They've done that sort of thing with the realistic comics. With the last good Punisher comic, they had no metahumans, no supervillains, and then randomly in one episode they brought in Wolverine and Spider-Man and Daredevil, and it was absurd, but it was so fun. And I feel like they could bring. I mean, they've referenced in Daredevil the guy with the magic hammer and the guy with the iron suit. Mm-hmm. They could bring in. They could bring in briefly some real tie-in to those movies. Although I was glad they didn't go with the snap at all.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. No. Exactly. I'm glad that they haven't tried to link that up, because that would ruin this universe for me. That would ruin Hell's Kitchen for me, I think. Mm-hmm. If that intruded on that. But you know what the perfect cameo would be in the next Daredevil season? Huh. Spider-Man.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, that would be so good.
The best Spider-Man we've seen, by the way.
That's right. To have this Peter Parker meet this version of Daredevil, and just like a two episode thing where there's an overlap of some kind, that would just be so incredible.
That would be amazing.
It'd be amazing. It'd be 1974 all over again.
I'm embarrassed by how excited that thought made me. Like, what a nerd I am.
Exactly. That's exactly it. It's completely El Nerdo. It is just the most nerdy thing, but that would be epic. That would just be completely epic.
There's so much material there that they could draw on, you know, from the comics to get these guys together.
Yeah. That's right. Huh. That's right. It would just be a really cool, and it would be cooler than the one-off episode with Power Man and Iron Fist. That them just walking around talking, trying to resolve it, whatever. Yeah. But I can't remember if it was in the second Luke Cage or the second Iron Fist. But that one episode, it was a little. It didn't do it for me. Even though I want to see those two characters together, that didn't do it for me. So I don't know. Maybe it's just me being that way.
I'm not sure if you know, but Turk wasn't a fan of the Iron Fist show on Netflix.
It's the first time I'm hearing it.
This is the second time that Turk has been on These Go to 11. It's the second time we've heard the anti-Iron Fist rant. And it's also the second time we heard, what was the other thing that he went off on earlier? And I wanted to point it out, but he was going so hard I couldn't stop him. I don't remember. I'll realize when I go back and listen to it, because this has been too good to not experience again.
Well, I mean, this is, you know, there are some things you can get me very worked up about, but comics happens to be one of them. and this is, we live. I'm telling you that I just think to myself, if there was a way to get my 12-year-old self in this part of the world, you know, to see these movies, his mind would be blown, because that for me was I was just like, why can't they? You don't need a lot of special effects to make these comics. You could make these comics, And then we got that Captain America with the clear shield on the motorcycle on TV, and that was horrible. And then the Bill Bixby Incredible Hulk, which was mostly horrible, and the one-off with Doctor Strange on TV, which was completely forgettable. And all of that was.
What about the 90s? 90s Captain America with J.D. Salinger's son, Matt.
No.
Remember that one?
Yes.
What a gong show, man.
Yeah, exactly. What a gong show. That's exactly right. The only one that really kind of flew that was really close was the 90s version of The Flash.
Oh yeah, with
right?
Tom Wesley Shipp.
Yeah, Tom Wesley Shipp, yeah.
And I mean, I know it didn't last. Nobody watched it. I think I was the only one watching it, but
I was watching it Turkish.
It was close. It was close.
Yeah.
I was watching it every week after I got home from Taekwondo. I would run to the TV and turn it on.
Yep.
And I remember the day it wasn't on anymore, I almost teared up.
Yep.
Because it felt so much like a comic book.
Yep. It was really, it hit the vibe. It was really close for what it ought to be. We should do, okay, now listen, I mean, we've been here for an hour. I don't know how long you guys want to do this, but we should do. I'd be willing to come back and do an hour on the Arrowverse on the CW.
Okay, yeah, I'd be down with that.
And it's not because I love it. It's not because I love it, but I think there's so much to talk about there that it would be interesting.
See, I'm in the
middle. I
middle.
wouldn't have as much to say, but I'm always game.
I'm in the middle of going through Arrow right now. I just started season 2. I'm keeping up with Flash regularly, so I have that. And then my goal is to hit Legends. So hopefully by the time we have you back on, I'll be through everything.
I watched the first season of Arrow on Netflix, and then I started the second, and in the intro, he's like, I can't be the killer that I once was. And I was like, this is boring.
Well, we struggled through the first season of Arrow. Okay, I don't want to ruin our next time, but I'm going to say this.
Okay,
but I'm going to say this. As a family, we started watching Arrow because there was some good parts to it. The first season of Arrow, there was some good stuff. It wasn't all good stuff, but there was some good stuff, and we kind of suffered through it. And then the second season of Arrow turned into what I call stupid girls get punched. And when when it started being that every time, there was some girl who wanted to be like Arrow, and she would just get punched. And I was just like, this show is. I mean, I'm not super sensitive to stuff like this, but this show is sexist. This is horrible. There's nothing about this that makes even narrative sense, and we just had to stop watching it because I was just like, we're not watching that anymore.
Well, how are we going to do an hour on it then, man?
Oh, because all the shows. We got to talk about Supergirl. We got to talk about Flash. We can talk about Arrow, and then we will try to talk about League of Legends, League of Losers.
I haven't even. I got a friend who's really into this stuff. He's a Lutheran pastor. He watched a little of it, and he said, "Dude, don't watch it." And I guess it was the same sort of stuff that turned me off to Supergirl.
Yeah.
One thing that
so we don't have to do that episode.
We got to have you on again soon, though. One thing that we didn't talk about with Marvel TV is Agent Carter.
Oh, dude, we could do a whole hour on Agent Carter. We absolutely could.
Let me finish the season I'm working through, and let's do it. That's good TV, man.
Yes, absolutely. Well, guys, thanks for having me, dudes. That was awesome.
Thanks for being on, man. You're an authority on the topic.
I have a lot to say. I don't know if I'm an authority.
Oh man, guys, this was great. Another great episode, as Zach puts it. I say that every time, but what can I say, Zach?
It's
true
always
every
true,
time.
Man.
That's right. It's always true. So, guys, we're going to go ahead and sign off. We just rocked the Casbah.
Please go to 11.